Now, two things are probably going through your minds while reading the title of this new series. The first one probably being, well no, Sherlock, what else is new? And the second one being, okay, you monster-obsessed wackaloon, what's this series going to be about? ENSHOHMA Likes Giant Monsters is a series where I, ENSHOHMA, talks about individual giant monsters from fiction that I enjoy personally, and not just the mainstream choices that everyone else goes for right away. So don't expect to see episodes dedicated to the various incarnations of Godzilla or King Kong anytime soon, unless you commission me for an episode with cash, but maybe we'll talk more about that later. And expect to see me babble on about lesser-known obscurities, though I may touch upon B-list and C-list characters occasionally, especially if you pay me a commission with an episode with cash. I would be amiss if I didn't state that the format and concept of this series was directly inspired by acquaintances and friends, Kevin Dorendorf and his excellent book, Kaiju for Hipsters, and fellow video makers Earth Baragon with his Library of Monsters and Chad Rocco with his Familiar Faces retrospective series. Please check out all three of the aforementioned individuals in the links that I put in the description below. That's underneath the video, in case there's some of you have no idea what I'm talking about. You know, if you scroll down on the YouTube, you'll see a description. Anyways, and to also show the offbeat nature of this series, we're not going to be featuring a traditional kaiju or just Japanese-born giant movie monster. No, I've decided to go with a fictional supervillain who also counts, to an extent, as a giant monster. You know what's one subgenre of giant monsters I don't see discussed enough, especially on YouTube, if not at all? That being the Monsters of the Week featured on Super Sentai and its American offshoot, Power Rangers. As much as I would love to get into the overall subject of my personal fascination with these particular characters, it's best we save that for another video all by itself. So instead, let's focus on one of my more personal favorite Power Ranger guest villains, with our very first featured profile here on ENSHOHMA Likes Giant Monsters. Madame Woe, alias the Nightmare Queen, first appeared in episode 13 of the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the episode itself entitled Peace, Love, and Woe. Madame Woe's character was adapted from the Japanese inspiration for Power Rangers, Kyoryu Sentai Zyuranger, while she was voiced by Alex Borstein, the actress who was a mainstay of Mad TV, the late-night live-action series that aired on Fox, not the failed Cartoon Network version, and would go on to voice Queen Machina in Power Rangers Zeo, and more famously, Lois Griffin in Family Guy. Before we continue, I must make it clear that I'm only focusing on the American version of this character, not her original Japanese counterpart and source inspiration, Dora Ligor from Zyurangers, who only had a single episode and never achieved giant form in any further appearances. Madame Woe is an elemental monster, possibly created by Finster, although her origins are somewhat left ambiguous since she seems fully formed and long existing before she's summoned forth in the episode. Now, for those who probably already know, and those who probably don't know, Power Rangers told the story about 5 teenage superheroes who battled against Rita Repulsa, an ancient intergalactic witch, and her army of supervillains and created monsters. Said monsters were often the work of Finster, a gnome-like assistant to Rita Repulsa, who would create these creatures from a magical clay that would then be brought to life with a bizarre, monster-matic machine. These creatures, for the most part, are basically elaborate versions of the ancient golem tale, although every once in a while you got creatures that were created through unorthodox methods outside the monster-matic machine. Most notably the Nasty Knight, who seemed to be summoned by Rita Repulsa herself, and possibly Madame Woe, although at the beginning of the episode, Rita Repulsa does go to Finster saying that she needs Madame Woe, suggesting that Madame Woe might be one of Finster's creations. Madame Woe was sent to capture the Power Rangers at the park. Instead, however, she made a simple mistake and kidnapped one of Billy's many guest star love interests. This love interest, named Marge, was then sent to Madame Woe's own personal dark dimension. A rather simplistic but cool-looking set, involving a creepy lake, dead trees, and a dark, eternally night sky. While Marge was trapped in this pocket universe, the other 5 Rangers was alerted by Zordon, their big old floating head mentor in a tube. And like many of the monsters from this series, Zordon gave the Power Rangers a rundown of who the character was, again suggesting that Madame Woe has been around for an exceptionally long time, or at least was activated and sent into action against Zordon and his allies in the past. According to Zordon, Madame Woe apparently brings sorrow and misery to everyone she meets, so maybe that's the reason why she's all alone by herself on an altar. Now, many of the monsters from the first season of Power Rangers, much like the monsters of Zyuranger, were directly based on creatures from mythology or in some cases classic literature. According to the Power Rangers Wikipedia, or Ranger Wiki, her motif is based on rain, which I guess would explain the somewhat anthropomorphized version of clouds and rainstorm, especially with her long, flowing hair, which I think is supposed to be reminiscent of water, or large drenches of rain. Her name, Legor, or Rieger in some spellings, means heron, as in the real-life bird. In Greek mythology, the heron was a messenger for the goddess Athena. In several Eastern cultures, the heron is sometimes regarded as a symbol of the sun, the red counterpart to the blue jewel on Dora Legor's and Madame Woe's forehead. And whereas Dora Legor was the only female Dora monster in Zyurangers, Dora monster being the term used for the golem-like creations for that series' version of Finster, she was also unique in Power Rangers before being the first female monster to show in the series. However, thanks to some voice acting choices with later characters, such as the Octoplant, Madame Woe did not end up being the lone female monster of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. For the most part, it's a gorgeous design. She's very elegant looking, and the usage of heavy cloths and a simplistic masks makes the character move a lot quicker in the fight scenes and martial arts stunts than most of the other monsters seen this season. Although granted, it is a little humorous when they're swinging the actress or actor on a bungee cord as she's flying through the sky. Clearly, he or she is being slung like a rag doll. The simplicity and cloth route with the character makes her stand out from the majority of other monsters in Zyuranger. So much so that had she not been another Monster of the Week, you could easily mistake her as one of the lead villains. The long blue hair, long transparent nails, and the rather thick and huge crown adorning her head are nice touches as well. Unfortunately, the Dora Legor costume from the original Zyurangers is nowhere present in the American production, and it appears that they had to use some really crappily made recreation of the original mask for the brief scene where Billy grabs the jewel on her forehead, the source of her power, to destroy. Now, I've heard some sources say that this is in fact the original Madame Woe mask itself, but I highly doubt that, even if we were to take into account the degradation that many of these monster suits go through after their initial episodes. And yes, despite my infamous fancy for monstrous women in fiction, Madame Woe is definitely more gorgeous and beautiful, but not exactly waifu material. Wait, no! Although I enjoy her design immensely, the one thing I do have to take points away, so to speak, is her incredibly obvious and easy to get to weakness. Something that's a personal pet peeve of mine when it comes to various villains in fiction. In the context of Power Rangers, Madame Woe's powers and abilities originate from the jewel adorning her forehead, her powers and abilities all being elemental, such as her ability to control water, wind, lightning, winter-like cold, and, rarely seen, heat. However, once Billy was able to get a hold of Madame Woe and wrestle her to an extent, he grabbed the jewel and easily crushed it with his bare hands. I wish they had gone another route with the destruction of her jewel on her forehead, although the idea of the Rangers gathering together and pointing the power cannon at her face and blasting it off is a little extreme, and I could see how that would not fly. Although she herself never returned in the TV show, she was mentioned by name and in footage from the two-part episode The Island of Illusions, which in a sense is basically a clip show. Here she is brought up to teach Billy that he has bravery, and was called the Nightmare Queen, which is a really nice nickname, something that most other Power Ranger monsters rarely receive. Hosehead, loser, jerk, stupid turtle, etc. And that would have been the end of Madame Woe, had it not been for the surprise success of this series, which led to a number of spin-offs and merchandise, namely the video games. Most notably, the Sega Genesis Mega Drive version of the video game, which was a one-on-one competitive fighting game, featuring two different game modes, a scenario mode, where the player completes against a series of CPU-controlled opponents, Madame Woe among them, and battle mode, which is basically a free-for-all matchup against various characters. Among the various monsters, Zords, and Power Rangers that the game has to offer, both as playable characters and as enemy sprites, Madame Woe is among the playable villains in the second scenario, as well as, again, the boss villain. And this was a really cool addition. Whoever was in charge of the video game gave her extra personality. Madame Woe was a somewhat respectable villainess in the original television series, but here she's given a bit of a, and for lack of a better term, bitchy attitude, complete with the anime-style noblewoman's laugh and screeching screams against her opponents. And while her heat abilities are nowhere to be found, her freezing abilities are turned up to 11, notably an Ice Breath ability, which was briefly seen in her original episode appearance, but is used as her main ability of attack in the video game itself. I don't know why Madame Woe was chosen over, say, a more popular female villainess such as Scorpina, but the thing with Scorpina is that when she grows giant size, she becomes a completely different design or monster in her own right, and I'm guessing the game developers, not wanting to do 2 extra sprites, chose Madame Woe. But again, I'm not complaining. Madame Woe is a very cool character, and it was really awesome to see her go giant size in this video game, fighting against other opponents such as the Dragon Zord, the Megazord, Goldar, and the Minotaur. Madame Woe is also featured in the RPG series Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid, which also includes gorgeous artwork of the character, which stays true to the original design, but given a comic book style elegance rarely seen with the Power Rangers franchise. Seriously, she looks fantastic in these illustrations you're currently looking at right now. Less appealing in my opinion, however, is her appearance in Power Rangers Mega Battle, a downloadable beat-em-up game based on the original Power Rangers series that was released in 2017. Here, Madame Woe is reduced to a simple enemy sprite and appears en masse throughout the game. Not only that, but her design, which can barely be seen on the small format, is given a sexier blue-skinned appearance. And while I know many of my frenemies, Brayton, Kaiju Noir, would laugh at my disdain for this design, I honestly prefer the more elegant and less sexualized Madame Woe as far as designs go. Something that I aped in my own illustration for both this episode and for my previous series of giant monster-inspired portraits entitled Kaiju Portraits, because Kaiju Portraits roll off the tongue a lot better than giant monster portraits. Less so than the name of this series, that's for sure. Will Madame Woe ever return in the future? I honestly don't know. But considering that there seems to be a push for more merchandise inspired by the first season, and with relatively forgotten monsters like King Sphinx and Pumpkin Rapper getting tons of merchandise in turn, I think we might be seeing a little bit of Madame Woe. Recently, it's been announced that Power Rangers will be abandoning its co-production and use of stock footage from the original Japanese Super Sentai and its partnership with Toei Productions, in order to create a fully Americanized Power Rangers. I have many complicated feelings towards this, especially since a lot of the American-produced Power Ranger content in the last couple of years have ranged from extremely lame to maybe a little too dark and grim for its own good. But this also gives an opportunity for the monsters to finally shine, both as characters and as reoccurring threats, as opposed to a dime a dozen Monsters of the Week that eventually merge with one another as the series goes on. In fact, I think that's one of the major tragedies of both Super Sentai and Power Rangers, the inability to develop villains, outside maybe the main group of antagonists who are reoccurring throughout the whole series. Granted, there's been exceptions to this rule, but let's see what happens. I doubt Madame Woe will be given the same sort of treatment as, say, like what's been done for the Rangers themselves in the Boom Studio comic books. But at the same time, it would be neat to see her as a recurring foil against the various heroes. And the fact that she brings misery and woe to all she meets might be explored as a somewhat sympathetic background to the character, in the sense that she's a loner who can never make true friends, even her fellow allies in the forces of darkness. That's probably me just projecting for this character. And that's it for the first episode of ENSHOHMA Likes Giant Monsters. I decided to focus on a unique but relatively simple character for the first episode. On the next episode, however, I think I'm going to touch a middle ground between the obscure and the famous by discussing a lesser-known monster from the otherwise world-famous Godzilla franchise. Find out who it is next time on ENSHOHMA Likes Giant Monsters.
You know what you did, Brayden!
You said this thing was safe!
He created it!